Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Inside Life and Godliness podcast. My name is iheoma, and here we speak on faith and lifestyle. How have you guys been, and how have you been faring from the last time we met? Today is another lovely day on this episode or on this podcast. What I planned for us to discuss is not what we're going to be discussing today, because while coming back home, a topic just kept resonating in my heart, and I kind of wanted to brush it aside because I have a script to follow and I want to try as much as possible to be structured, right? Following your script gives you some sense, or following your schedule gives you some sense of structure in a way. But then again, I know that many a times when I want to come on to talk about something and I just try to suppress the need to talk about it, I see it somewhere else as though it's a confirmation that, okay, you need to talk about this, you need to buttress this point. And I opened some picture, and it was exactly what was in my mind that was shown in that picture. So I said, you know what, I definitely will talk about this. Maybe this is why this episode wasn't released yesterday. I'm sure that from my voice you can hear that I have catarrh. I don't know who has catarrh in hot season, but here I am struggling with catarrh, which means I have to start drinking all the hot things of life and sweat in this heat. I don't even want to talk about it. Aside that, I don't know, today has just been a very down day. Almost everyone in the lab was asking me what's the problem. Within me, there was really nothing much going on. It was just empty, but I don't know what my face gave away, or I don't know what my face, communicated to people. Maybe because I was having catarrh and I was just like, oh yeah, I just want to be on my own and just be quiet and all that stuff. So what do I want to discuss today? I think I want to discuss the issue of trust. And I say this as someone who is still learning. Like, it's almost as if I'm in KG1 of this class of trust in God. I know that a lot of times we are excited when people talk about God, and when people talk about His promises, and when we talk about how God has a lot of plans for us, good plans for us. And a lot of times we even quote such scriptures that the thoughts that the Lord has towards you are that of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. Eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, neither have mouth uttered what the Lord has for those that love Him, as well as many other scriptures that have God's promises for us embedded in them. And we're usually excited when those scriptures are brought up or when we read it, until it is time for us to live in those promises, or the journey into those promises rather, it becomes a serious problem of trust. I don't know, the song coming to mind is trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. A lot of times we as humans have a thing where we just want to be in control, and that obviously is a clear case of trust issues, when you always want to be in control and you don't want to let go because you don't trust that the other person that you're handing that thing over to can handle it the way you're handling it. And it's funny because we don't even know what we're handling. We don't know how to handle it. You don't even know how to handle your life. You don't know the way your life should go. You don't know whether you should go north or south, but there is one who has an aerial view, a bird eye view, a drone view, and still has a close-up view as to how your life should go. And yet we have issues handing our lives over to that person. It just shows that at the core of our problem, we have a trust issue. So a lot of times we're praying to God concerning His will for us, and we say it out loud that we want to do God's will. But when it comes down to us actually living out God's will, it becomes a problem, because we just say it with our mouths that we want to do God's will, but in our hearts we actually have a different will that we want to carry out. So we come to the point where we want our will to be God's will. We come to the point where we want our need to be God's need. We come to the point whereby we want our spec to be God's spec. And it doesn't work that way, because we have a very limited scope of things. We have a very we can't see far. God sees as far as into the future and future. He sees the past, he sees the present, he sees the future. He sees any dimension, 3 dimension, 4 dimension, 1 dimension, any dimension you can talk about, he sees it. And so he has a perfect view and a perfect knowledge of what you need, of not even what you want, of what you need. He has a perfect view and a perfect knowledge of what will benefit you. He has a perfect view and a perfect knowledge of what will profit you, what will profit me. But because we have trust issues, because we find it so hard to just allow God, it's almost as if we're losing our minds when we're not in control of something. We're losing our senses. We're literally restless. Like, what am I to do? Oh, I can't just live. And so we begin to concoct things. We begin to look up things. We begin to take things into our hands. At the end of the day, many a times or sometimes we are happy that, we drove things like this. But you know that if God had handled that, he would have, somewhere, you just know somehow that if God had handled that, he would have handled it way better than you did. And the funny thing about this is how that in the moment, God's will might look like wickedness. In the moment, God's will might look like suffering. In the moment, God's will might look like God is evil. But at the end, because he knows the end from the beginning, he already knows what is at the end. The end is always, for every child of God, the end is always glorious. I don't care if you're in a different country, or if you're in Nigeria, or if you're in Ghana, or if you even die in Malta, and you're thinking, why would God allow his child to just be slaughtered like that? The end is always glorious, because the killing of that person is not the end. There's a promising reward for people that will be killed that way. There's a glorious end for all of us as believers. So, whether on earth or even after this world. So, if we know, and we know beyond all reasonable doubt, that God's end for us is always going to be glorious, then even though we're having, palpitation when we want to hand over, we should just tell God, Lord, I am having issues. I am having control issues. I can't seem to let go. Help me. Be vulnerable with him. Help me. Let me just let go. Because if you don't let go, it's a problem. It's a problem. And I just want to, I've said this before, but I want to buttress it again, that many a times it looks as though we really trust God. We say it with our mouths. It feels as though we trust God because he did A for us, and we feel as though we trust God. But in the deepest of situations, or in critical issues, we find ourselves handling things when it should be God handling the things. For example, rather than waiting for God's leading to go to a place, or rather than waiting for God's leading for something, you decide to work it out by your own self, or you decide to take laws into your hands, when you can submit it to God and ask him to lead you and ask him to guide you when it comes to his will for you in relationships or marriage. Yeah, I know that I like this person, right? But is it God's will for me? If it's not God's will for me, then I just better drop that topic and drop that and just pray to God. Because the fact that you like somebody does not mean that it is God's will for you. God sees, and you're basking in your emotions now that, I like this person, we might be a wonderful fit. But God sees the end from the beginning, and he knows that if you stay with this person, you might end up, or this person might end up drawing you back, or one thing or the other. And so he has seen somebody that you need, that will complement you, and you will complement the person. And you are just basking in your own feeling like your is now God's will. Your emotions cannot influence God's will. That you desire something cannot necessarily influence God's will. That you love something cannot influence God's will. God's will is God's will. And let's not deceive ourselves with saying God's perfect will and God's permissible will. God's will is God's will. If he allowed it, he just allowed it, that okay, do, but it does not make it God's will. That he allowed it does not make it God's will. What is God's perfect will for you? So our drive, or our ambition should be that we always want to be in God's perfect will for us. What is God's perfect will for you, rather than chasing after straws, that there's a permissible will, therefore your permissible will is just we we like to paint things, God's permissible will, and the permissible will is what we like. It's what we feel like should be God's will. A permissible will is basically our will, but we just gave it a new baptismal name as God's permissible will. But low key, it is your will playing out, and then you now title it God's permissible will. So our desire always should be in God's perfect will for us. And if we're to exist in God's perfect will for us, we need to grow in trust for God. We should not allow the devil to weaken our faith. We need to grow in trust and dependence on God. And above all, we need to be grounded in his word, because it's his word that will fuel this trust for you. This thing is not easy. It's never easy, because God is saying B, you're hearing things B, you're hearing C, but you're seeing A play out in your life. But we know that all things work together for good. All things work together for good. So I just implore us that in whatever endeavors that we find ourselves, or location or job, let us trust God to guide us. Let us not take laws into our hands, or choices that we make. Let us trust God to guide us. Let us trust the leading of the Spirit. Let's not take laws into our hands. So, hey, this recording is already 12 minutes. I want to say one story before I drop. This morning, I was trying to get my NIN to impute in my OPay account, because they said March 1 that CBN will restrict my account. So to avoid that, I put in my NIN. And so while searching for where my NIN was, I saw my ATM card. I was like, oh, the ATM card, this ATM card is even here. So I did what I wanted to do, and I dropped the purse. But the thought of my ATM card kept on coming to mind. The thought of my ATM card. Why? And I know that in some way, that is how God leads me to something. When a thought of something keeps coming to heart. So I was like, okay, why is my ATM card coming to heart? It's just an ATM card. Or is it because I just saw it now after how long? But I just kind of dismissed it. I was like, oh, let me carry it. But then again, I've already thrown the purse to one side. I was like, if there's any need for anything, I beg, I'll just use my phone to transfer. After all, my phone is always with me. Lo and behold, I was supposed to withdraw. I didn't withdraw. Something came up. And finally, it was the end of work. And I needed to withdraw because I was going somewhere. I went to check for the person that I was to withdraw money from. The person was gone. But that's not all. The funny part of the story was that my network had gone off. So, and it's only, I use network to transfer. I can't use USSD because of phone number issues and all. I can't go into that story. But I tell you, that was how I was just left stranded. I was like, God, I'm so sorry. I should have just taken this ATM card when it was time. Why didn't I take this ATM card? And I was like, oh God, please help me to be more sensitive to your leadings. Finally, I got to a POS, and I got a POS guy and I told the guy, please on hotspot for me. I need to withdraw. And he did that. But I was like, yeah, I repented. I'm like, God, I'm sorry. And I'm just going to follow your leadings. I beg. I don't want this kind of situation. And I really want to grow, to be very sensitive to God's voice and to God's leading. So, that aside, let's learn to trust in God's leadings. Let's learn to trust in God's will for us. And let's learn to trust in God speaking. And this same God that He's our creator, He's the one that formed us. He will bring us into the path of truth. He will bring us into the path of gloriousness, and He will bring us into the path of peace in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you also. Thank you so much, rather, for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, comment below. Thanks so much, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye.